I'm going to start by cutting out my stocking pieces. My lining is made of satin. I like satin and quilting cotton for linings. Those are my two favorite fabrics to use. And I have interfaced it with woven fusible interfacing. My inside is quilting cotton, or my outside. My exterior is quilting cotton, and I've interfaced it with fusible fleece. I like the finished product with fusible fleece. It means that it's not a floppy stocking. Here's an example of a stocking made with quilting cotton and fusible fleece. So when they hang, they don't lose their shape. But if you prefer them to hang a little more floppy, you can use the woven fusible on the exterior instead of fusible fleece. This is velvet. I even use fleece on these, and it has a nice loft, or has a nice weight to it. So here is my exterior of cotton, and my cuff, I'm using velvet on the exterior and satin on the lining, and these are both interfaced also with woven fusible interfacing. Because I make this pattern a lot for my own business, I have turned the pattern pieces into acrylic pieces. So that's what I'm going to be using today when I'm cutting these out. What I like to do with these rectangle cuff pieces is to mark the bottom, and that helps because the top is slightly narrower than the bottom, and it's easy to get them mixed up. So I always mark the bottom on one side, and I will do the same with my lining. And then when I go to sew the lining and the exterior cuff pieces together, I can just match up the sides that have that bottom marking, and that'll help me know which is the bottom. Now I will cut out the exterior. Now, before I do that, I'm going to show you, I did also, I've already cut out, interfaced and cut out a couple other stockings that I will be sewing along the way, so you can see what they look like when they're not just the standard toe and the standard cuff. So this way I can show you how to do these corners. This is the pointy cuff. And I also have cut out a curly-toed version and its lining, and a high heel version and its lining. So I want to show you those briefly. You'll notice that on the curly toe, let me get a pattern piece that would show this. On the high heel and the curly toe pattern pieces, there are these dotted lines that say cut the lining here. The reason being that this ends up being very small, especially in the smaller sizes, and so when you try to stuff the lining inside, it doesn't work. So the lining you'll just cut right here. This is the high heel piece, but the curly toe has it over here. Also, for the extra small and the small sizes, when I'm cutting out my exterior, I cut the interfacing on these lines as well, because those sizes are so small that even having little extra interfacing can make it really hard to get the heels and the toes to poke out properly. So here is my curly toe exterior and my curly toe interior. You can see I cut it like that. And my high heel exterior and high heel lining, cut like this. But this stocking that I'm cutting out right now is just the standard toe, standard cuff. Now, because I have this clear acrylic piece, sometimes I use it to cut out my pieces where I can see the right side. If I really want to make sure that I'm centering embroidery or fussy cutting I want a certain part of the print to be showing. Now, instead of making something out of acrylic, what I did for years is buy clear template, I guess just template plastic that you can find at the craft store. And I've heard that you can also use dollar store cutting boards and cut them up. And that can help you to be able to center your designs when cutting. But most of the time, if I don't need to worry about centering the design, I will put my fabrics right sides together and just cut them out together. Now, this is hard to cut out from this direction. I usually move my body around and come from this direction when cutting this part because the template is kind of thick. But if I do that, I will run into my camera. So I will just have to do that. And then I pin around the outside edges. Okay. And I'm going to do the same thing with my lining. One last tip, if you are cutting out one of these pieces, if you're cutting out a piece like this, where you can't really get your rotary cutter around, sometimes I use my smaller cutter and I can get it better. Other times I will just use my pen and mark that, cut as far as I can, move the pattern piece, and then use my rotary cutter or scissors to get that smaller part. Same when I'm cutting these, I put my pattern piece down and I will mark these parts, these points with my pen, and I'll use my shears to cut up to those places because it's hard to use a rotary cutter. All right, I'm now ready to sew my stocking. Oh, one final piece. The dimensions for the hangers are given in the pattern, but there's also pattern pieces. I have another, this is the acrylic plastic, or not acrylic, the template plastic that you can buy at the craft store. I use that to cut out my hangers if I'm doing a bunch. But if you are using a fabric like velvet, like this, that doesn't fray, but is also very thick, what I did is, instead of this hanger later on is going to be folded in half towards the middle and then in half again. In order to make it less thick, I have cut half an inch off of this. So a quarter of the width I've cut off, and I'm just going to fold these 2 times. So it's 3 layers thick instead of 4. And that only works with fabrics that don't fray. So I have a narrower hanger loop piece that I use for my velvet, and the wider one, which matches the pattern, that I use for thinner fabric.